What a shocking night it is for Victorians. Of course, they saw it coming, of course, but now going back into a serious lockdown right across Melbourne for the next 6 weeks. Let's cross down to Melbourne now and catch up with Sky News reporter Patrick Murrell to bring us up to date. Patrick, people were starting to get out and about, go to the pub, get back out into the parks and restaurants. It must be a devastating blow for the city to have to go back into full lockdown.
That's right, Chris. Melburnians in particular have just over 24 hours of freedom left before they have to return to stage 3 restrictions, essentially back to square one, what was then the height of the pandemic. It's now the height of the pandemic again. Now, broadly, what this means for metropolitan Melbourne, as well as the Shire of Mitchell, the only regional local government area to have a substantial number of coronavirus cases, is that from midnight on Wednesday, there'll only be 4 reasons to leave the home. That is, to give and to receive care, to work and to study, shopping for essential goods, as well as daily exercise. More specifically, this is a stay-at-home order. Work, exercise and shopping are allowed. No visitors allowed at the home. A maximum of 2 people allowed to gather outside, and no trips out to regional Victoria, which has escaped this round of lockdowns with almost no coronavirus cases out there. Interestingly, on that last point as well, it is a bit different to the first round of restrictions when people were allowed to essentially wait out quarantine in their beach house or their house in regional Victoria. This time they will have to reside at their primary residence, essentially what's on the driver's licence. Schools are affected as well. Melbourne schools, as well as schools in the Shire of Mitchell, have had their school holidays extended by 1 week for prep to Year 10 students. Year 11s and 12s will return as normal on Monday, as well as VCE students. There is a chance that remote learning could return for an extended period. Not for regional schools, though, which are largely unaffected. The Premier, want to keep regional students and Melbourne students on par, though, so there won't be, there's a low chance of remote learning returning for those Year 11s and 12s. Now, this will be a particularly bad day for businesses, many of which will just be reopening for 20 people. Retail and hairdressers can remain open. Eateries, so that's your pubs, your cafes, your restaurants, they can only do takeaway from Thursday morning. A difficult thing to hear when many of them would have just started to turn a profit or even just break even. Markets can only sell and food and drink. Beauticians are closed. Personal care is closed as well. Another point of difference to the first round of stage 3 restrictions is that there are a number of outdoor activities which were either ambiguous last time or not permitted. Some of those include surfing, golf, fishing and boating, which are permitted this time, although with some restrictions.
Yeah, fascinating, Patrick, that Daniel Andrews seemed to have learned his lesson on golf and fishing. He's going to let people go ahead with that, which is pretty sensible. Tell us what's happening on those towers, of course. People around the country seeing those Housing Commission towers locked off, the people putting the signs up and complaining about it. Does the lockdown of everybody in the metropolitan area allow any greater freedom for those people?
Well, the short answer on that is not just yet. Of course, this affects about 3,000 people in those 9 public housing towers in the suburbs of North Melbourne and Flemington. The Premier says that government teams are going door to door in those buildings trying to test everyone. Once everyone is tested, then there will be restrictions eased if that's possible. Those towers will then return to stage 3 restrictions, essentially the same as the rest of metropolitan Melbourne, where they are only allowed to leave for those 4 reasons. Of course, that is an improvement over not being able to leave at all, but that will be contingent on all of those residents in those towers being tested over the next few days.
And tell me, Patrick, what does it feel like as someone living in Victoria? You've got a hard border going in across the New South Wales border in 6.5 hours. South Australia are sending police to harden their border with Victoria. You're hemmed in, isolated as a state. I know you're from Adelaide originally. You won't be able to go home for at least 6 weeks. Do you feel like the country's closing the state off?
Look, it does feel a bit like that. Of course, Victoria was a bit slower than the rest of the country to ease its restrictions in the first place. Now we're back to square one, essentially, which is a bit frustrating, and a lot of people would be feeling that way. They'll be using the next few hours to get in one last meal at the pub, one last smashed avo for brunch tomorrow morning. State border closures will impact a lot of people who are perhaps planning on taking a holiday even in the state to regional Victoria or across the border to New South Wales. And again, on the personal level, I won't be able to travel back to South Australia for at least the next 6 weeks, and realistically probably a lot longer than that.